The Dark Souls franchise. Ever since I first touched Dark Souls 1 as a gamer, I feel like I changed. This was a wake-up call to the industry that this type of media didn't need to hold your hand or make you sit through feature-length cutscenes to get a narrative across. And thanks to this beautiful, beautiful man who he just can't get enough of those toesies, a new subgenre of games was born, with incredible lore and insane gameplay mechanics. I absolutely love this franchise, and I've done a couple of videos on each of the titles in this franchise separately, but I wanted to do a supercut, fixing some wrongs in those videos and giving long-form bingers something to pop on while they work or grind these games out on a separate monitor. So without wasting too much of your time, let's take a deep dive look at Dark Souls 1, Dark Souls 2, and of course Dark Souls 3, and see if they were really that good. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and let me know what your favorite title in the franchise is, because I know my rankings are gonna probably upset you. So an old white guy thinks he knows best and is slowly but surely killing off an entire civilization. A tale as old as time, I suppose. Feels just like home, to be honest. So it's up to you, Hollow, to venture across this medieval land, unraveling its lore and story, and if you don't like it, just travel back in time and change it. Yes, time travel. Did I f***ing stutter? On your journey, your quest is really just dethroning a family that's naming convention is almost as bad as the JoJo's. And after that, you have to make the most important decision of the entire universe, to either turn a light bulb on or off. Welcome to Dark Souls Remastered, a truly well-crafted game for about half the running time. Is that a giant mushroom? Dark Souls 1 is a flawed masterpiece. It's one of my favorite games of all time. Like, it's right up there with some of the greats. And as much as I would love to say I was an early adopter of the FromSoftware games, but I actually knew nothing about Dark Souls or any of the other titles until the Prepare to Die edition came out on Xbox 360. And honestly, that was just because a YouTuber I followed at the time played this seemingly random game and it looked really good to me. So honestly, major props to old school YouTuber SSOHPKC for introducing me to this legendary title. So after looking at Elden Ring and the DLC expansion, I thought it would be really cool to dive back into the title that not only created a whole subgenre of games, but also redefined third-person sword fighters as a whole. And though this isn't the first title that the Chad Miyazaki directed, it is the one that really popped off and put him on his throne. So I want to discuss this title before possibly looking back at Demon Souls, and that's kind of where you guys come in. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to look at the rest of the Demon Soulsborne Kiro Ring series. There's gotta be an easy way to say that. Just any games from FromSoft, I guess. Let me know in the comment section. But this video will be looking at the remastered version of Dark Souls 1 that was released in 2018, as well, the original had a few issues. Glaring issues. Honestly, that game felt like it was held together with duct tape. This version is at least somewhat less buggy, especially in Blighttown, but there is some issues still. God, I hate these spinning skeletons. Okay, where did he go? But it's not just glitching through the map. Some of the hitboxes are funky to say the least, and game dev decisions that, well, should be considered war crimes. God, I hate this boss fight so much. Ah, come on! I honestly could have just cut this fight out of the entire game and it would have been 20% better. But like I said, the series didn't really pop off until some YouTubers and content creators made videos on Dark Souls because it was so quote-unquote difficult. Honestly, it wasn't. Well, maybe back in the day, but I kind of like to think the series have made us gamers a little bit better than we were. You know, maybe we finally started to get good, as going back to this game felt more like a tutorial to the standard Soulsborne formula we've come to love. And the only real issues with this game, and the only difficulty I can see, is some of the more limitations of the engine. So I'm going to be honest, dying 15 times to the Bed of Chaos, I don't think that's a skill issue. I think that's a dev issue. Nowadays, everyone is talking about Miyazaki's creations, but to be honest, the series didn't really go mainstream until Bloodborne. And I mean, let's be honest, that's a near perfect game. God, why can we not get a remaster? So this game does one thing absolutely flawlessly, and that's finally crafting the world and story to make it feel alive, but at the same time also given this sense of loneliness and isolation. The game will make you feel depressed, and I absolutely love it. So with that in mind, I want to ask the question, was Dark Souls 1 really that good? Or were we just scraping the bottom of the barrel for a decent action-adventure RPG back then? Let's take a look. Okay, so after building my beautiful hollow, yes, I'm going Dex again, I like to go to Thief class as well because it means I get the Master Key without having to waste one of my gifts. So I can proceed to waste one of my gifts, getting the Witch Ring, just so I can get one dialogue box much later in the game. And we wake up in the Undead Asylum. Thanks to this Amazon delivery guy, we get the key to our cell and we can start cleansing the land of, well, everything. Unfortunately, our delivery guy took one too many piss bottle breaks and he gets fired, but he is generous enough to let us have a couple of them. This is an Estus flask, one of the most important items in the game. And now for every single Souls-like game, we will be referring to healing items as Estus flasks, same as with the in-game currency and XP being Souls. They change this in like every game, and I still call them these out of habit. That is set in stone. That is like ingrained into my DNA at this point. Next is the bonfires. These are little checkpoints throughout the world. They will refill your Estus flasks and can be used to level up and repair equipment. But when you sit down, they will reset all enemies in the area, even the ones that you killed. Moving ahead, we find our first boss, which is the Asylum Demon. Thankfully, I'm more of a butt man, so this isn't much of an issue. You'll find this tends to be the meta for most enemies in Dark Souls 1. Just to dodge the attacks, get behind them and go for that booty. So I guess we can talk about the combat. It's a bit janky. The combat is stiffer than Uncle Daryl at the family barbecue, but the first thing to get used to is that whenever you input a button command, you are strapped in. You cannot cancel out of these, so please do not spam the dodge roll or attack because you will go through them the same amount of times you press the button. Trust me, spamming will hurt you more than it will help you. We defeat Boogie 2988 and we escape the asylum and head to Lordran. Now, this is one of my favorite things about the Dark Souls franchise. It rewards players for diving back into the game again and again. I was on autopilot, and considering I haven't played this game in years, the first thing I did was go straight down to New Londo to get my first Firekeeper soul. This is a late game area. We grab the item and we are now able to get more healing from our Estus flasks. After this, I went straight to the catacombs, trying my best to not even brush up against the enemies because these guys will one-tap me straight away. The reason I'm doing this is because if we go through here very quickly and jump off on this bridge, we can get probably one of the best dex bleed weapons in the game. And if you guys know me, you know it's a scythe. Alright, so we're pretty geared up already, so going through the Undead Burg is where you'll get the feel of how these areas are going to be moving forward. And honestly, I get chills every time this dragon appears. It's so fucking cool, man. On your way, there's a merchant here that really likes his bucket. Hey man, no judgment, you do you. Though he's fun to Photoshop. Now, most players will kill this guy to acquire a katana, which is a pretty good dex weapon. I didn't use this, but I still killed him for it. But I thought I'd mention it. This guy has probably died the most out of all the NPCs, except Oscar. It's pretty smooth sailing here. There is a Black Knight here that is very tough, but killing them will grant you a bunch of souls and you can get some pretty sweet weapons out of these guys. They don't respawn, so it's kind of luck of the draw until much later on in the game. But I did get lucky and get the Black Knight shield, which is honestly one of the best shields. Now, before we get to the boss, there is a separate door that we can use the Master Key on. Heading down here will take us to Havel. Now, he is again another late game enemy and is very tough. He will most likely take you out in one shot if he hits you with his silly banana sword. But with patience and a lot of backstabs, you can get the second best ring in the game, Havel's Ring. This will greatly increase your equip load, so most of the armor you wear now will not make you fat roll. Alright then, it's time for the boss.
I said, nope.
Now, some people say the Taurus Demon is the first boss of the game. I think because you can still cheese him like the Asylum Demon. I still feel like this is tutorial area. So we skull fuck him and then move on. Now we get to meet the most memed and quoted Souls NPC, Solaire of Astora. This jolly fellow not only introduces us to the summon mechanic of the game, he wants to find his son. No, not that kind of son. That kind of son. Wait, that doesn't really help clarify, does it? No, he actually just wants to find his own literal son, and if we don't do some very convoluted bullshit, he will turn into a bug man and attack us. This game is weird. Dark Souls 1 has an issue with NPC questlines, though most of the time it's just finding and talking to them in different areas to progress their questlines. One misstep here will cut you off from finishing a quest. And some NPCs have so many hidden mechanics. Like one NPC will join you to fight a bunch of enemies, but depending on how much health he loses during this fight will predetermine the reward and ending of his questline, like with the Onion Knight. Now that's kind of ridiculous. More often than not, it will end in a tragedy. I spent hours on this playthrough helping the funny fat guy and his daughter, and they just fight and she kills him.
My father, always hollow man, has been subdued. He will cause no more trouble. It's finally over.
Worth it, I guess? But we'll dive into Solaire's a little bit later on. The next boss is the Gargoyles, and this is, to me, the first actual boss of the game. And it's a Miyazaki classic. It's a 2v1 boss fight. And with how much more clunkier Dark Souls 1 is to the other titles, it can be pretty annoying. I think you're supposed to go into this fight with the intention of trying out the summoning system, as you can bring in Solaire, an NPC, to help you in the fight, or a bunch of other actual players. And I guess doing this just even the odds against the two gargoyles. Going in solo, it becomes more of a chess match, waiting for the RNG movesets to line up between the two so you can attack. After defeating them and taking a souvenir, why not? We ring the first of 2 bells to proceed the story. And I love that while you play the game, you can hear other actual players getting to this point in the game. Every time you hear the bell, and it's not you doing it, that was another player. Coding that must have been a nightmare, but that is such a fine detail, and I loved it. It's so good. Doing this one thing doesn't change the world at all, but it makes it feel so much bigger and more lived in. It's really, really cool. And I don't think any other games at the time did something like this. Now the next destination is the second bell in Blighttown, but before you blow all your newfound souls on a few levels, I'd like to talk to this blacksmith and drop a bag with him to acquire an item. This will allow us access to a new area, and it is a bit expensive, 20 Gs, but don't worry, you can get these back pretty easily by fighting the enemies in this new area. Or, not saying I would, you could just glitch them. Probably the best soul farm in the game. It's also here where you can join a cat covenant that has you invading unexpected players doing the exact same thing we did to get to where we are now. It seems a bit unfair, but okay, I'll do it once at least. But the better reason for joining this cult is to kill your fellow Covenant employees, because if you do it to this ninja, you get a funny roll ring. It looks incredibly dumb, don't get me wrong, but once you wear it, you will never go back to the standard dodge roll in this game. Not only is it faster, but it has slightly more iframes and will cover more distance than the best standard roll. I said Havel's ring was the second best ring. This is the best ring. This will not come off for the rest of the playthrough. All right, going through the Undead Burg a little bit more, we get to the Capra Demon. Now, this guy is not that much of a problem, but his goddamn pet dogs are so annoying. I don't know if it's just because I'm running a scythe, but my attacks don't come off fast enough, so I get staggered so hard by these stupid dogs. It just makes it such a hard time, and the arena is so small, you can't get away. But anyway, defeating him gives us a key to move down into the sewers. where we meet the Gaping Dragon. I swear, doesn't gaping mean something else on the internet? Oh dear God, don't look that up. I'll never look at this boss the same. Another boss where the meta comes into play, just circle around him and go for his butt. Super easy boss. After taking another souvenir from this guy, now we can keep heading down the sewers through this door to head to Blighttown, but I prefer to use the back door to Blighttown. Using the master key in New Londo, we can actually open up the back door to Blighttown, and this is a much easier way to get to the area. Now this area in the original title, when the game first launched, was Lag City. It was almost unbearable with the frame rate hitting so low and the constant poison debuff. It was the reason why everyone hated this biome and why there's always a joke about a swamp and poison area in Miyazaki's games. Honestly, in the remastered version running on a PC, it's not a problem. I feel like the issue with this area was mainly the frame rate. But using the shortcut, we can head pretty much straight to the next boss, Quelaag. The Y-Boner is strong with this one. Unfortunately, we deal with her pretty much more of the same. Like I said, it's a meta for a reason. Just dodge the attacks, go for the butt. Okay, I want to take a second to discuss the boss fights as a whole here. So Dark Souls 1 is renowned for being difficult, and the boss fights are a major part of that. And to be fair, some of them are. We'll get to that. But this is the blueprint for most of the successful encounters you'll have with the bosses. You will spend most of your time knee-deep in these boss models' ass parts. And well, to be honest, that explains a lot for the community. Now that's mainly a criticism for this game, as I know later on in the franchise, they do get a lot better and a bit flashier and more gimmicky. But in Dark Souls 1, it tends to just be a big dude with a big sword. And you can't really blame him, it's the first title really that popped off, and they do have a few unique bosses. But I just thought it was worth bringing up as it just become quite a standard part of the game, and honestly, if it wasn't for the lore connecting these bosses so deeply to the world you're exploring, they would become super forgettable. Now, I might be alone on this for, and I'm sorry if it comes across wrong, but it's something I noticed playing this game again after so many years, so I thought it was worth bringing up. Anyway, with her defeated, we can ring the second bell, and this will grant us access to Sen's fortress. But first, there is another disgusting, horrible, cute spider thing behind this invisible wall. We need to join her covenant and offer her 30 humanity to open a door much later on to the lost Izalith. This will be needed for Solaire's questline for some reason. That's not everything though. If you join the covenant, you can get a few spells from this egg guy, but you need to hit one of his brothers first and get infected. Then wait about 20 minutes to then become an egg. Okay, doing that means the racist egg person will now sell us stuff, as well as a way to cure our, can I say deformity? Am I gonna get cancelled for that? Alright, Sen's Fortress is basically a Gmod death run, filled to the brim of these snake people. Okay guys, hear me out. The enemies aren't so bad here, but there are so many traps to deal with, be it hidden crossbows, giant blades, balls. But hey, look, at least there's treasure. Oh God, why? Well, I guess now I'll be hitting every single chest I come across. I love PTSD. If you're running through this area and having an issue, you really need to make sure you tap this secret bonfire. It's so useful, and it will really help when it comes up to the boss. The boss itself is a giant iron guy. The iron giant, I could have made a joke here. And do I have to keep explaining it? You know how to defeat him. You literally just have to dodge him and go for his butt. Though it does seem like his health bar is quite huge. My damage is not quite there. Maybe it's just the insane armor he's got. It took a while. I kind of got a bit bored during this boss fight. Defeating him gives us an express ticket to Anor Londo.
It's time to go to heaven, my
Stop
child.
it, what are you doing?
Stop it. Don't
Stop it,
fight.
cut it out,
Don't
help.
stop. Come on, Zach. Let's go to heaven. Wait.
This place looks so good. Chills, guys. Literal chills. And Orlando looks so warm and divine. It's such a nice set piece. But enjoy this moment because this place is out to get you. And as soon as you meet these archers, you are going to hate this area as much as I do. These Black Knight archers have been put here specifically to ruin your day. Hey guys, I just need to get to... Excuse me, sir. Just let me budge past. I'm just gonna... Get the fuck out of my way! Ah! Oh, hey, so there. That's really the only issue in this area. Then we get to the boss fight. Orestein and Smo, the tag team that everyone talks about. And these boys have their bases covered. Smo is the bigger, slower, heavy attacker. And Orestein is the more agile, lower damage dealer. But he has a bit of a lightning argument. Going in solo, I recommend trying to keep these two well apart, and that's easier said than done. But unfortunately, fighting them both at the same time is not the one, Chief. They are going to destroy you. But on the flip side, the way I try to do it is keep them separate, like I said. Unfortunately, it means the gameplay tends to look like this.
Why are you running? Why are you running?
Orestein, please, can you just charge me already? Jesus Christ. Once one is defeated, the other one will check to make sure the death debuff is permanent. And then absorb the other's power. Dude, I really hope he was dead. I think it can go both ways, but most of the time it tends to be Smo that I end up dealing with last. And his moveset doesn't change too much, he just now gets the lightning powers that Orestein had. It's a long boss fight and it can be really tough, but the reward is amazing. This is the best video game. Not that this needs to get any better, but Guyinthetie will also give us the Lord Vessel. This allows us to not only open the way to the final boss, but gives us the ability to teleport around the world instead of walking everywhere. This is amazing. I am so glad this became a staple in the series and it's just a standard ability later on. Unfortunately, in Dark Souls 1, they're a bit more stingy about where you can teleport. You can't teleport to every single bonfire. It's only a select few, and I don't understand why. Later games, it's just if you sit at a bonfire, you can go back to that bonfire, no issue. But that's not where the downsides stop, unfortunately. This is where things get a little crappy for Dark Souls 1. Dark Souls 1 is an absolute joy to play, but honestly, once you beat Orestein and Smo, the devs kind of just, I don't know, give up. The game gets a little meh from this point forward. With the Lord Vessel, we can now go and collect these boss souls. From Seath to Scaleless, Brave Lord Nito, the Bed of Chaos. I really don't want to deal with this. Oh. And the Four Kings. So we will be running around the map Pokemon style, catching these boss souls, ready to fight the big bad. And it's not that fun, if I'm honest. I know there's hundreds of content creators that have talked about the last half of this game being boring. And I wouldn't say boring, it's just a bit meh. The first half, everything felt grand. Every step forward felt like you were progressing. Once you get the Lord Vessel, it does kind of feel like the game's quiet quitting. It just kind of stops trying too hard. But we do have a few things to knock out before we do that. Unfortunately, turns out Guyinthetie just wasn't that into us. But that's because she was in fact never actually here. This was a fake version crafted by the Dark Sun Gwendolyn.
Thou that tarnisheth the Godmother's image, I am Gwendolyn. And thy transgression shall not go unpunished. Thou shalt perish in the twilight of Anor Londo.
Ha! I knew they were fake. I will not take this disrespect sitting down, so we head down below Anor Londo to mess up this femboy. I like the fact that this effect here isn't a cool coding trick or anything. They literally just stretch the hallway very far, so if you take too long in this boss fight, you can actually get to the end of the hallway. Now this boss is essentially just a how well can you dodge fight. It's pretty easy until he does these orbs. For this, I would recommend jumping behind a pillar just so you don't take any damage. Also, be careful, if you kill the firekeeper that tries to attack you on the way to this boss fight, and you die during it, you will spawn all the way back at the start of Anor Londo and have to go through this whole area just to get back to the boss fight. It is so infuriating. When it first happened, I thought it was actually like a bug, but it turns out this is actually programmed in. Nice. Man, I miss the steak of maracas. Next up is the Painted World, which you can access by heading back to the Undead Asylum and picking up this doll for some reason. Both these areas are optional, and this one is pretty cool because there's snow. This place is essentially a dumpster where Anor Londo throws all of its trash. That includes these gross hollows, some very lanky birds with surprisingly good butts, and the worst trash, the furries. The area is pretty short, and once we get up to the boss, we can actually just leave without fighting this half-dragon beauty.
Thou must returneth whence thou came. This land is peaceful, its inhabitants kind.
Okay, first off, if that's the case, why are you literally holding a weapon right now? And also, second, why the fuck has everything been trying to kill me since I entered this place? Anyway, Must Breed Priscilla is a gimmick boss, and she just kind of goes invisible. But if you tap into your inner Miyazaki and look for her feet, you can work out where she is. Again, it's a gimmick boss, but I don't think I've played a game that's done something like this. It's really interesting. With her defeated, we can now leave this place. Yippee! Now, before you have a go at me for fighting her, because there was a way we could have not defeated her, first off, it's Dark Souls. If there's a boss, I'm gonna fight the boss. And second, I wanted a bigger scythe. You see, with her boss soul, you can create the Life Hunt scythe, which is what she was using. It's pretty cool. It does insane damage and way more bleed than the Great Scythe ever did. The caveat to this is that it will inflict bleed on the user with every swing. Now, this probably doesn't sound like a good trade-off, but trust me, with the Blood Shield and the Blood Bite Ring increasing my bleed resistance, it actually isn't too much of an issue. With this build, I actually only gave myself bleed once, and that was fighting the Four Kings, and because that's a damage check boss, it was gonna happen regardless. With a new weapon in hand, I think it's time we take on the DLC, which is a very simple process. First, you have to kill the Hydra in Darkroot Basin, then go to the Duke's Archives to kill this random golem for absolutely no reason that drops a pendant. Wonder what that's used for anyway. Then we go back to where we killed the Hydra and coast the edge of the lake, trying to avoid the bottomless pit because this lake is not very shallow. What feels like is a glitch going around this area gets us to another golem which we fight, and a lady falls out. That's pretty random. She pieces out, so now we have to exit the game or go back to a bonfire and then re-enter this area, and a portal will be here where a big hand will pull you in. Yeah. Simple. How do people figure this shit out without a guide? Anyway, welcome to Ulasil. Several years in the past. Right out the gate, we have a skill check with a boss, just to make sure we're up for the challenge of defeating this area. It's not too difficult. This leads us into a big forest where a bunch of scarecrows attack us, and there's nothing much else, to be honest. It's kind of a bland area, except this dragon. It's so fucking cool, man. Further down the area, we meet a fellow guy who got transported out of his time into Ulasil, and this was obviously a major hint to Bloodborne, right? Next to the Bloodborne guy is Artorias, who is my favorite designed boss. He just looks so cool. His fight can be pretty mental as well. He has some insane mobility and can dish out a lot of damage. Halfway through the fight, he can also charge up his power level to become even more of a threat and even more aggressive. I recommend taking a bow into this fight, as if you pull off a headshot while he's charging up, it will actually stagger him out of the animation, skipping that phase until he tries it again. It is super helpful for this boss fight. Lore-wise, I love this boss fight too. I love the idea that in the present, Artorias is revered as the Abyss Walker, the guy who went over to Ulasil and saved the day, when in actual reality, he came over here and got a big fat L. Don't meet your heroes, kids. But if Artorias didn't kill the big bad here, then who saved Ulasil? If you defeat him, he will then have a groupie here that kind of sits at his grave. I found it kind of funny rocking Artorias' outfit, walking past her, going towards a boss fight later on. That was really difficult. Like, imagine yourself, you're sitting at the grave of like this person that you loved so much, and someone wearing his actual entire outfit just keeps running past you. If you talk to her, she'll ask us to give his soul back, so I just told her ass to sit down.
How? You humans, my dear.
Going deeper into Ulasil, we can actually find the best humanity farm in the game. And these spirits are so creepy to look at. Such a cool area. Now, before we head to the boss, there is actually a secret area that we can go to following this cat. The cat will actually lead us to a younger version of Sif the Great Grey Wolf, who was Artorias' companion, who went to Ulasil to help fight the darkness. He's kind of getting beaten up by a couple of these spirits, so we save him, and now we can summon Sif for the boss fight coming up. And that boss fight is a doozy. Manus is the hardest fight in the entire game. He is pure aggression. And don't even get me started on this combo. If even one of these hits connect with you, you might as well put the controller down because you're going back to a bonfire. Like I said, you can summon Sif for this fight, but why would you? Honestly, Sif doesn't do anything. He barely even takes aggro. Hey Sif, you want to help me out, buddy? Sif, can you come? What are you doing? Sif, please help me. And his second phase, man, the BS spellcasting goes hard in this boss fight. You have to pray that you have perfect timing on these spells to dodge them or tank the hits, because these hit hard. I know you can get an item that will help you deflect the magic spells, but from what I hear, the timing on that is really tight. You're better off learning to dodge the hits, honestly. It took me so many attempts to beat this guy. I used up all of my humanity just summoning Sif for each fight. Dude, this boss is so difficult. And I'm getting invaded. Awesome. That was my last humanity. Cool. So in this boss fight, I relied quite heavily on the Dark Root Ring for this run. Thanks to the iframes and the speed of the dodge, I was able to avoid most of the bullshit hits. And whenever I could see that he was going to do the combo attack, I was able to get away far enough so he didn't actually destroy me in one hit. Killing Manus does end up freeing the princess. But unfortunately, there's no one here. So alright, I'm gonna go back to my timeline now. Alright, so it's boss rush time. First up on the list is Sif the Scaleless. He is a dragon that betrayed his own kind because he got bullied for not having cool scales. What a nerd. The first time you meet him, he'll be impossible to fight, so you have to straight up die to continue this area. It's kind of annoying, but you can equip a ring of sacrifice so you don't lose anything in this process. So I recommend doing that. Once you climb down into the crystal cave, he will rush down and stop you from destroying his immortality stick. Okay. Just be careful. You can actually bring in enemies from the area into this fight. What are you doing here? Next up on our list is Sif the Great Grey Wolf. Yep, that Grey Wolf. Sif isn't actually a boss soul we require, but we do have to defeat him as he's guarding a ring we need to access one. Now, you can do this fight very early on, essentially as soon as you get Artorias' seal from the blacksmith. But because we did this after doing the DLC, we get a slightly different cutscene where Sif actually remembers us and lets out a whimper while we try to pet him. I'm almost there, just a little closer. Must boop. knows. I love this interaction, as the base cutscene is just him aggressively protecting the grave like all other bosses. He sees us, he gets pissed, we fight. But here Sif is far more sad about having to fight us. The downside is, unfortunately for him, because I've left this fight so late in the game, I kinda dunk on Sif and I feel bad about it. And the devs knew this. Whoever decided to program a hurt state for Sif, you are a fucking monster. No other boss in this game has a, oh, you've hurt me state, except Sif. What the fuck? I don't want to finish this fight. Sif, man, just give me the ring, bro. He's not even hitting me, man. Sif, this is hurting me more than it's hurting you, I promise. What a terrible day for rain. Anyway, next is the Bed of Chaos. But first, remember like 20 minutes ago in this video, I mentioned a shortcut to save Soler? Well, that's just before a boss fight with another big-ass demon. Honestly, I need to discuss this. We fight this guy like 4 times in this game. I feel like the devs were really proud of the detail they put on this guy's ass. Anyway, you can open this door here, and if you kill the bugs that are just randomly walking around here, we save Soler's life. At least physically. Mentally, he seems not too good.
Was it all a lie? Have I done this all for nothing? Oh, my dear son. What now? What should I do? My son. My dear, dear son.
It's alright, buddy. I'll buy you a nightlight or something. With Soler saved, we head to the Lost Isolith, and let's be honest, the devs just copy and pasted the same butt model everywhere. This is so stupid. And to top it off, the Bed of Chaos is the boss here, and oh my god, this boss, in theory, doesn't sound too bad. There's 3 points you have to hit once and he is defeated. That sounds pretty good. But after breaking the first thing, a few issues arise. Now you have to dodge this Groot-looking motherfucker in his big-ass hands while he tries to just gently brush you into a bottomless pit. And the first time you do this, you can't even see the pits. So unless you have this place memorized, you're more than likely going to get brushed into one of these holes. And you have to run away from the boss, so you can't see his movements. So more than likely, you're just going to get a random hand come out of nowhere and knock you into a hole. This boss must make the no-death run enthusiasts so nervous. You're not fighting a boss, you're fighting RNG. Jesus, finally. Oh my god. I think I died to this Bed of Chaos more than I did Manus. Alright, so next is Nito. He needs a better name. Oh boy, I hope the next boss is more Nito than the Bed. Oh my god. So we head down to the catacombs and drive by Pinwheel. Honestly, probably the coolest boss lore-wise, but the easiest fight in game. He's 3 people fused together, a man, a wife, and their child. It's kind of fucked up. I love it. Thankfully, we saved Soler from the weird light bug, so we now have it ourselves, so I use this in the catacombs so it's not so dark. Here we meet Patches, who sucker punches us.
You've got what you deserve. You damn clerics. You're worse than maggots. You must be loaded. I'll strip your corpse clean.
After literally just using a ladder right next to where he knocked us into the hole, we return the favor. Alright, Nito is a cool fight, but he has backup. First off, do not go to the back of the arena. This will make the boss 10 times harder. The big skeletons will stay out of your way if you don't go into their territory. I recommend fighting Nito at the entrance of the boss fight, where you only have to deal with a couple of small skeletons, and I would use Nito to take these mobs out, as he will actually damage them when he attacks. Wait for him to do this, and then when it's just the 2 of you, do some damage. Honestly, the boss is kind of a breeze. He has one attack that you have to listen to the audio cues to dodge, because he'll send his sword through the ground, but that's probably the only issue I have. Alright, lastly is the 4 kings in New Londo. Now this is a damage check boss, as more kings will spawn after a certain amount of time, so you need to take out the previous king before the next one spawns in. It's not too difficult, but you do have to do quite a few hits to get these life bars down, and this is where I actually gave myself bleed using the life hunt scythe. It wasn't too bad, it just meant I had to use up my Estus to heal up the damage. It didn't kill me, which is good. I still think the trade-off for the amount of damage I output towards the bleed I intake is worth using it. Now with the boss souls collected, we can head off to the final boss, Gwyn. And though this area is just a straight shot to the boss fight, it's pretty awesome to look at. Everything is burned, it's destroyed. There's only a few of Gwyn's loyal knights patrolling the area. It's very foreboding, I like it. Thanks to doing Soler's questline, he'll actually be here as a summon for the final boss fight with Gwyn. Unfortunately, the boss fight with Gwyn is a joke and is super easy. You do not need to summon anything for this boss fight, but I decided to summon the Sun Bro just to let him have the glory of killing the guy responsible for the world being the way it is currently.
Very good.
After, of course, asserting my own dominance on the guy. Get wrecked, Gwyn. Ironically, letting Soler take the final hit, I still decide to plunge the world into darkness. This guy really is not getting a sun. As obviously keeping the world on life support, it wasn't working, and though some would say this is the bad ending to the game, by walking away from the bonfire, I actually think this is the good one. Not all good things can last forever, and we could already see by keeping the world alive in the same methods that Gwyn was doing, was making more things fuck up. I mean, look at Ulasil, the darkness was literally taking over far more aggressively than if we just turn the light switch off. We leave and join up with the funny moustache creatures and share one more final terrifying grin to end the game on. And that's Dark Souls 1. An absolute stellar game for the first half. And then the game kind of sits at a lukewarm temp for the rest of the game, to a very incredibly underwhelming final boss. Now I loved the game, and I know that's purely down to nostalgia, as it was still kind of a new concept for these games at the time. But I do think other games have done this far better, and I even think to an extent Dark Souls 2 is a better Dark Souls game. That's gonna piss off so many people, I'm so sorry. Like I said, I loved this game, but whenever I talk to people who have played this game, I will say, yeah, it's my favorite game. I love it so much. If someone hasn't played Dark Souls 1, I wouldn't recommend it. I know that my taste and my appreciation for this game is very nostalgia based, and I can see it has so many flaws. So was it really that good? Yeah, but also no. Dude, I'm really bad at this. It helped jumpstart a whole subgenre of games that a lot of us as a community have come to love. But if you were to look at this game on its own, and its basic model, like back to when it first dropped, how buggy it was, the hit detection being wonky, questlines just straight up not working, I'm honestly surprised this game got so much love. And I'm thankful for it, but it's not a well-crafted game. And I know that's kind of a weird take. Like, I've sat here and complimented this game the entire video, but looking at it from like a fence-sitting perspective, like trying to take my own biases away, I feel like the faults of this game and the issues do outweigh the storytelling and the lore. Like, those are great, don't get me wrong, but the gameplay we loved so much for its difficulty wasn't made to be difficult. I think it was just clunky, which we kind of just took as a difficulty. I don't know, it's really interesting to look at. After playing games like Elden Ring where the difficulty is difficult and it doesn't feel like it's broken, going back to Dark Souls 1, the game isn't that hard. It's just the funkiness of the game design and engine that tends to throw you off. Most of the bosses can be dealt the same way just by going for the butthole. So like I said, it's a title that I love so dearly but really struggle to recommend for anyone to play, especially if they come from the newer titles in the franchise. I just feel like the magic is really hard to replicate if you experience these titles in reverse. It's kind of a had to be there situation. The game is clunky, the game has massive flaws, but the world building is so amazing, and some ideas in this game are so ahead of its time, and the community feel from a game that is so lonely is mental. as a community, we are together. We are fighting these bosses together. There's messages everywhere telling you secrets and hints. And yet the overall atmosphere is very foreboding and depressing. And like I said, not many titles can get that. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. As always, I would love to give a major shout out to my patrons for supporting the channel. First off, I want to give a massive shout out to The Shane209, Pitstab, and Ali Tato. Thank you guys so much. You are the slowly growing darkness inside my soul. Sorry this video took so long to get out. I actually decided to go outside for once and do some gardening and ended up absolutely obliterating my back. This grass everyone says to touch, very overrated, don't do it. So with that said, I'm going to take a crap ton of painkillers and I'll see you in the next video. Ty out, peace. Dark Souls 2 is better than Dark Souls 1. Look, I was both heavily disappointed and also kind of enamored with Dark Souls 2 at launch. There were certain things that felt off for sure. Enemy placements was obnoxious and downright trollish at almost every opportunity. And hitboxes, oh boy, the hitboxes, they were wonky and really needed to be buffed out with a patch or maybe in a completely re-released title. And don't even get me started on bosses constantly relying on that outnumbered handicap, artificial difficulty. Yes, FromSoft, I remember Orestein and Smo. You don't have to remind me in every goddamn boss fight. I mean, back at launch, I thought the game just overall was not made well. It felt like the gameplay was pre-alpha, and that was just because I didn't understand the most important stat in the game.
Oh my god. I get it. I get it.
This thing, oh my god. So people either love this game or love to hate on it. It's the true Marmite of the Souls franchise. Throw on top an engine that needed to make so many compromises so the game could run on, at this point, old hardware, the 360 and PS3. Bear in mind that the PS4 and Xbox One were out by the launch of this game. So with all that in mind, no wonder this game was riding the struggle bus at launch. But hey, at least it has our favorite foot-loving masochist Miyazaki behind the, oh yeah, he didn't really make this game. Oh boy. Now a lot of people tend to think Miyazaki was against Dark Souls 2 and had absolutely nothing to do with it. And that's why he isn't attached as a director, but that's not actually entirely true. You see, Bandai bought 2 sequels from FromSoft after Dark Souls 1 was a massive hit and basically created its own subgenre. But FromSoftware thought sequels would be easier to make, so let's put a B team in the reins and have Miyazaki supervise when he can. I mean, what's the worst that could happen? And they also had big ambition. We all remember how heavily the game pushed its lighting system before launch. I mean, just look at this pre-release footage. The game looks so good. The torch was going to be less of a gimmick and more of a necessity while you explore the world, which makes sense. I mean, it's Dark Souls, right? It's in the title. But due to development hell and playtesters being a little bit too afraid of the dark, it ended up being far more washed out looking. Dark Souls 2 went from a moody and ominous looking game to just stick a fluorescent light above the main character. Like seriously, I've been to supermarkets that have less migraine inducing lighting than this game. But that's not all. Doing some research, the game was supposed to have a day and night cycle and also implement time travel as well as a weather system. And also the linear design was meant to be far more open world. Wait a minute, is Elden Ring the Dark Souls 2 we never got? Anyway, exploring Drenlaic again for this video, I've started to realize that this game actually slaps hard. Most of the core issues I had with Dark Souls 2 weren't actually issues. For instance, I originally played the game not putting a single point into ADP, which meant, well, the gameplay like ass. The roll basically had no iframes and it felt like hits were hitting when they shouldn't. And it also took 4 to 5 business days just to drink a single Estus. Honestly, I cannot believe I played the entire base game and finished it like this. Surely that should be an achievement or something. Now don't get me wrong, it is incredibly stupid to lock a mechanic like that in a stat, and I'm so glad we never did this again, but obviously it was a design choice by the devs. And once you know about it, the game is far more fun to play and you have to be far more tactful with your level ups. Same with the durability system. Most weapons feel like they are solely made out of a baby's soft spot, and it will break before you can even find the next bonfire. But this is intended to increase that feeling of panic, and once you start preparing for that, maybe by bringing a second weapon or stocking up on repair powder or this repair magic spell that I absolutely love, it actually isn't too bad. It adds to the difficulty. But the long treks back to the boss arenas, they can sometimes take 10 to 15 minutes just to attempt a boss again. I've said it before, but those Marika statues in Elden Ring, holy, they are a blessing. And even though Miyazaki didn't have much input on the story, it's honestly up there and kind of rivals Dark Souls 1. So for this video, I'll be playing Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin, which is basically just a fancy way to say this version has all the DLC. And let's check out if Dark Souls 2 was really that good. Alright, so again, this time I play a Dex character and massively regret this later on. Dex is not strong in Dark Souls 2. Don't be me. Go strength or magic. So it turns out we have a hollow STD and we want to get rid of it, and a creepy woman tells us to venture to Dranlaic to fix this and to maybe contact all our previous partners. We head there like many other hollows before us, and after being berated by a bunch of old women in a nursing home, we receive a cute doll she made. This is interesting because we actually get kind of forced to watch a cutscene here, and it's not just a boss encounter or opening a bridge or something. This is like an actual video game cutscene. Why do these feel weird in FromSoft games? So 10 minutes of dialogue later and 40 plus hard candies heavier, we leave and head to Majula, and it seems like the player base really don't want to play this game. Apparently this is actually a meme to scare off new players. It is brilliant. I love the community so much for doing stuff like this. Anyway, welcome to Majula, your hub for the game, and unlike Firelink Shrine, you'll actually be coming back here a lot through your entire game. And I mean, look at the aesthetic. The scenery is so good. Even though Dark Souls 2 is running on an outdated engine for a platform that's a gem behind at launch for this game, it looks so good. I think this game looks so much better than Dark Souls 1, and I will die on that hill. The one thing I really like about Majula is that it's not just your first hub area like Firelink, it's a community that grows the more NPCs you meet and help on your journey. And it even has its own economy. Some traders will get more options and more stock in their stores the more you shop there and give them your souls. And this beautiful woman has the market cornered on my souls. She sells you an infinite amount of life gems that will make your journey through Dranlaic so much easier. But the most important character is the Firekeeper. She's not only the character that gives you some direction on where to go next, but she's actually the only way you can level up in Dark Souls 2. I'm not sure why they decided to drop the level up system at any bonfire like the other titles, but it does give you a reason to head back to Majula and see what's changed. And if she's not your taste, there is also a talking cat that I am pretty sure is hitting on me.
Ooh, you smell wonderful.
Like I said before, even people you save on your journey will head back to Majula and even allow you to clothe them.
Do you have any clothing that you could spare? I'll take anything.
What? Don't look at me. I gave her a bra at least. So the Firekeeper tells us that we need to acquire a bunch of boss souls so that we'll be strong enough to head to Dranlaic Castle, far off in the north. The suggested route will be to head to the Forest of Giants and explore the castle there, but you can technically head anywhere you want. It's impressive to see the freedom the game gives you right out the gate, and though some people will criticize the game and say it's not really given much direction to the player, I think that's part of the experience. Your character hasn't been here before, he's just as lost as you are. I think it's brilliant. Exploring and discovering things in Dranlaic is insanely satisfying. Alright, heading to the Forest of Giants, we stumble upon the first boss in the game, and I'm surprised it takes so long, to be honest. Usually in Soulborn titles, you get the tutorial boss pretty much right out the gate, and even though most of the time you're supposed to lose that fight, it took quite a while to get to the last giant. But to be fair, he is a very easy boss. Just hugging his back and avoiding his occasional foot stomp, you'll be just fine. He also has incredibly trash reach with his hands. Correction, he has slightly less trash reach. We've all been there, right? Can't reach something on the top shelf, so you tear off your arm to extend your length. Jesus Christ. Exploring further in the castle will lead us to another boss fight, the Pursuer. And the name isn't just a cool boss title, this guy stalks you like a Minecraft YouTuber outside of primary school. Especially in the Scholar of the First Sin edition, he pops up constantly. It's here where I kind of want to talk about the hit detection a little bit more, and I know the comment section is just going to be skill diff or just get good Lamau, but honestly, it's wonky in Dark Souls 2. Granted, this gameplay is before I realized that there's a stat in the game that actually makes it more playable, but even once that's kind of maxed out, things are a bit hard to work out if they should hit you or not. It just feels like it's straight up the hitboxes. The weapons just have more reach than it should. And that might sound like an excuse, but I did not have this problem in Dark Souls 1 or Dark Souls 3, so I do think it is very particular to Dark Souls 2. Now, once he's defeated, you get a shortcut to go to the Lost Bastille, where you get to fight him again straight away, but this time he's tougher. So he's not a boss anymore, but he's actually stronger than his boss fight. What? And this isn't the last time. Like I said, he stalks the main character like Dr. Disrespect as he follows you into the bathroom. He's just always there. Alright, welcome to the Lost Bastille, an area that I shouldn't be at yet because I've used the shortcut, but for some reason, I guess because I hate myself, I've decided to take it on now. You really start to feel like the devs want to troll the player in this area, and rather than make a finely crafted difficulty, like in Dark Souls 1, they kind of went a bit more trollish. I kind of actually enjoy it. Don't get me wrong, the enemy spam in some sections is stupid, and the long ass journeys back to the boss fights can get very obnoxious. But knowing that the devs are out to get you at any given time, I don't know, it gives me PTSD and puts me on edge all the time. Surely that's how you would feel in this situation. You check every corner, you tactically pick which mobs you want to aggro because as soon as you think it's safe, it's not. Dark Souls 2 isn't a tough as nails adventure RPG, it's a fucking horror game. It's also here where we find our first PvP covenant, the Bell Keepers, and I love this idea. It's basically just like the Cat Covenant from Dark Souls 2. You have this bell tower and you need to run through it, and once you ring the bell you can access the boss fight, but while you're running through, you can get invaded by players who are a part of this covenant. It's really interesting, but I tell you what's not interesting, the boss fight. Hey, we're struggling to come up with an idea for a boss fight. Just use the Pursuer. We've already used him like 3 times in this dungeon. Okay, well, where is it? Well, it's on a bell tower. Just use the gargoyles from Dark Souls 1. Hey look, we even still have the boss theme on the hard drive. Won't the fanbase be mad that we just reused the same boss with the same music on the same arena? What if we make them fight 5 of them at once and have the gargoyles move faster? My god, you're a genius. Like I mentioned, Dark Souls 2 loves gank fights, and this is honestly good practice to deal with these later on. You can't play Dark Souls 2 like Dark Souls 1. Crowd control is far, far more important in this game. But the gargoyles is an optional fight, you don't have to do this boss fight. And with it done, it's time to acquire one of the 4 old great souls that we require to progress the game, the Lost Sinner. I like this boss fight as you need to use the torch to light up the boss arena before you go in, because if you don't, you'll have a massive disadvantage on the boss. And this is kind of a theme with Dark Souls 2. I like exploring and figuring out puzzles that change the dynamic of the boss fight. I wish it was something that happened more in the series. It really gives you a reason to explore the dungeon before you just head straight to the boss. Pretty good boss fight, but with the Bastille done, like I said, we skipped a few steps by heading here through the shortcut. You're actually supposed to go through this pirate cove place and board a ship that will take you to the Bastille. Now we're going to go back and do that because this is probably one of my favorite areas in the game. It's super dark and I purposely turned down my own brightness setting so I could get kind of that original feel the devs probably wanted for this area, so I needed to use a torch to explore. And it honestly did make this area so much more fun to play through. They even have these abominations. I don't know, what the fuck is this? That react to the torch. I never knew they did this because, I mean, in the base game, it's so bright in here anyway, you didn't need to use a torch. Balancing my torch and where I light so I could fight enemies, it added a whole new layer to the gameplay, and I really wish the game had a bit more emphasis on this. I know they wanted to, but I don't know, the game just would have been amazing if they did. Alright, so to get the next boss soul, we need to head through the Earthen Peak, which is the poison area that I mentioned before. There's also another cool boss puzzle. The boss fight will have you in a pool of poison. That makes the encounter 10 times harder because you're constantly taking poison damage. But if you explore the castle and burn down this windmill here, the boss arena will be drained, making the boss far more easier to take on. Again, like I said, I love having a reason to explore every nook and cranny of this world. But with the poison area defeated, we now head to the Iron Fortress. And here you really start to feel the copy and paste button going into overdrive. I mean, just look at this footage here. This is me just trying to get to an optional boss fight. It's so frustrating. The issue is, like, it takes so long to get to the boss fight, and the Smelter Demon I actually had a really rough time fighting. It was for sure the hardest boss so far that I've fought, which is really odd because we fight his shiny variant much later on in the DLC, and it's a much tougher fight, but I actually found it easier, and that boss fight has a tougher run back to it. I mean, we'll get to that, but I don't understand how that one was easier than this one. Maybe I got good. And though I had difficulty with the Smelter Demon, it's still a good fight. What's not a good fight is the final boss of this area. It's an absolute joke. It's basically Satan. I mean, this guy looks like he is about to mess my day up, but he actually ends up feeling like an old PS2 boss fight from something like the classic God of War games. You just dodge his very easily predicted slam, and then you just chew on his arm hair a little bit. Bish, bash, bosh, boss is done. All right, so we went very high up. I guess it's time to go down. And to do that, we're going to need to do some parkour.
Parkour!
Unfortunately, it wasn't until after brute forcing this area I realized you could either bribe this guy who will just make you a ladder to go down it. That was information I really wish I had before I went down this well. Also, you can just take your armor off and you'll take less damage when you drop. Didn't know that either. That's good to know too. But wait, I'm not done. The stupid horny cat also sells you a ring that makes you take less damage from falling. I need to pay way more attention to these games. Anyway, in the well is where we can join the best covenant in the game, the Rat Covenant.
Take this ring. It was forged by a human who was one.
There's another area like this later on in the game for the same covenant, and the boss is the leader of the Rat Authority, and it's a dog. What? They literally just took the dog model and just blew it up and called it a rat. This is almost as bad as the dragon butts from Dark Souls 1. Okay, the Gar is an absolute shit show. Not only do you need to traverse Detroit in the dark, but this poison area is so aggravating. My poor desk got slammed every single time one of these statues shot a poison dart at me. And the enemy placement, dear lord, it's just not fair. For sure, this is Dark Souls 2 equivalent of Blighttown, and it's somehow worse. I would rather deal with the buggy, laggy mess of the Xbox 360 Blighttown than this trash. If we keep venturing downwards, we will get to the third boss soul that we require, the Rotten, and he suffers the same issue as, well, the last giant actually. It's pretty much the same fight as the Asylum Demon from Dark Souls 1. You just go for the butt. He's very slow, and if he hits you, he does do a lot of damage, but there's really not much going on for this boss. Which is weird because he's one of the old ones, one of the big bad bosses that we need to kill before we can progress. Now we can technically access one of the 3 DLCs by killing these giants in a secret room just before the boss fight. This honestly should be late game content, but because I'm an absolute Chad of a man, I decided to knock out the first DLC now, and I instantly regretted my decision. I am far too underleveled to be taken on the Crown of the Sunken King DLC. But hey, here we are, so welcome to the Sunken King DLC. If you like a lack of bonfires, hench mobs, and long ass tracks back to boss fights, this is the one for you. Most people tend to leave the DLCs after the main game, but not this guy. I hate myself. No, to be fair, I actually enjoyed this area a lot, and seeing the later boss flying around causing mischief as you explore the area is a great reference to the Undead Burg in Dark Souls 1. But my god, do not just run through this area as soon as possible. I got impatient and tried running through the main building just to get to the next bonfire, and I got absolutely demolished. So many enemies were chasing me, and I was met with this massive open area with water that slows you, by the way, when you're running through it. It's like the devs knew I would rush through this area into this open part. And there's 5 of these, whatever the fuck 5 of these things are, that not only can kill me in like 2 hits, but shoot a freezer death ball at me. Like, it's weird. You can obviously tell the devs planned you to try and skip this area, but it also feels very lazy game design. Like, it's just copy and paste. The area is just open with a couple of rocks. How do you describe this game? It's so intricate and so well crafted, and then it's met with such lazy, can't be fucked game design. Dear lord. The main boss fight isn't much better, as you have to run through a massive area constantly taking full chip damage just to get to the fight with Alana. And this fight with Alana is the one that gave me the most trouble in the game, full stop. Even the later DLCs, the final bosses, all of the secret tough bosses in the base game, none of them gave me as much trouble as this stupid. What are you? Seriously. I had to retry the Squidward Queen so many times, and she isn't that bad on her own, but she constantly summons a giant or a pack of skeletons to fight you, and sometimes even at the same time. It is so aggravating. It isn't one of those fights as well where you can just wait for an opening and then run through the mobs to attack the main boss. More often than not, when there is an opportunity to attack her, she just instant transmissions away. She is gone. Oh, you thought you were going to get a little bit of chip damage on the boss? Nope, she's hanging out with King Kai now. I must have spent close to 4 hours trying to beat this boss. Now, I will say, granted, I am under-leveled for the DLC as a whole, but my god, did I hate this fight. Once I finally defeated her, which took so long, I stupidly walked straight into the next fog gate, which was another boss. And I actually, no joke, I almost broke down and cried when I did this. I was so upset that there was another boss fight straight after. But I managed to suck it up, and to be fair, my weapon did break from the back-to-back fights, so I actually had to switch mid-fight, but it was pretty easy because my weapon was infused with lightning, and we know that shit is deadly for dragons, almost as much as a Snickers bar for a dog. Okay, so DLC 1 is done, and we have our first crown. I think I'm going to save the other 2 for much later in the story. Back to the base game, we need to head to the Duke's Deer Freya. But before that, I decided to make this playthrough a challenge run and switch from my trusty Yuji Katana to the Forlorn Scythe. Now, scythes are renowned for being absolutely garbage in Dark Souls 2. The moveset and overall stats and the speed that they dish out their movesets are heavily nerfed from the other games. Gone are the days we could go get the Great Scythe at the start of Dark Souls 1 and it just be the best dex weapon in the game. The Forlorn Scythe is just the same model as the Life Hunt Scythe for Dark Souls 1, but it has a cool little fire glow effect. I like it. Now, using a scythe is a challenge run in itself, but the Forlorn Scythe requires you to be fully hollow to honestly get any damage at all. I mean, look at the stats before and after going hollow. Your boy's not gonna have good skin for the rest of the game. It's a rough weapon to use, but you gotta admit, it looks pretty badass. I mean, my character later on just looks straight up like the Grim Reaper. I love this shit. Now, Freya, I hate spiders with a passion. 100% I have some form of arachnophobia. But this boss sucks for all the wrong reasons. First, like every fight in Dark Souls 2, there are multiple mobs you have to deal with as well as the boss. Now, you can avoid them by using a torch because this scares away the spiders, so they're a non-issue now, but I don't have a shield. Freya herself has 2 heads, and only a small specific part of the face allows you to damage it. And if you're slightly off at all, you hit what I assume is a brick wall. This is so aggravating. So many times you feel like you should be hitting Freya and you just don't. And Dark Souls 2 does this a few times. There's a couple of bosses that have this weird protective shell gimmick where if you hit it, you stagger, do no damage, and because of the stagger, more often than not, you're gonna get hit. So I just ended up running around in circles, attacking one head, wait for her to do an attack, and then attack the other one. Not too bad, just kind of obnoxious. With the giant spider dead, that's all the boss souls we needed, so let's safely go rest at the nearest bonfire. This actually scared the shit out of me. Having not played the Scholar of the First Sin edition of Dark Souls 2, this got me so hard. Wait, I didn't... Hold, don't cut that. So this guy basically attempted to do what we're doing and take the throne of Dranlaic to try and relieve himself of his dark sign curse. And when that didn't work, he done some experiments and, well, now he looks like this. He basically wants us to take on the bad ending of the game that got added to this version of Dark Souls 2. He pops up a few times on our journey from here on out to do a bit of a lore dump and to boost my heart rate. Dark Souls 2 gets a lot of hate, but you have to give it props for them changing up the status quo. Now even bonfires, the one thing in these games that make you feel safe, you're now a little bit uneasy to rest at. That's genius. That is like playing with the player, and I love that stuff. Anyway, with all the boss souls we needed, we can now open a door that will take us to Barum Azula. I've said it a couple of times, but this is probably the best looking area in the game. I love that you can see so many dragons just chilling in this area. And on your way to speak to the leader of the dragons, these soldiers that I mistook as enemies to start off with are actually kind of chill. They want to watch you fight what I assume are challenges to prove your worth to the dragon. It's really cool and gives you like a gladiatorial vibe. Is gladiatorial even a word? So the boss baby dragon gives us some cocaine that we now need to use to access memories of the giants. And we could do this by going to these trees. They give us a little look into what happened to the land all those years ago. You see, Vendrick, the cool guy who is king of Dranlaic, had a hot new wife, and I mean, they were pretty happy, but his missus is super racist against giants and convinces Vendrick to go across the sea to their land and start a war. This backfires as they return the favor and come over to Dranlaic. Now these battles are in memories, it's pretty awesome. And I'm also not sure if it's confirmed, but I think the last giant boss fight at the start of the game is actually an old imprisoned version of the Giant King, right? Like this one? Now warning, do not be like me and instantly use these giant souls you pick up for a quick level up. You need these to fight a hollowed out husk of Vendrick in a crypt a bit later on. Vendrick has 32 times buffed defense against you, as seen here. That's not a lot of damage. And each soul of the giant you have in your inventory will half that defense. So if you've got 4 giant souls, it will be a normal boss fight. If you don't, I'm gonna be here a while. Luckily, he still takes bleed damage, so even with his insane defense and without the souls, I was able to consistently get a little 200 damage tick on him, but this was a war of nutrition. It took way too long. Please, guys, don't be like me. Stockpile those giant souls. This boss fight is probably the reason why this video took so long to release. Alright, so we're at Dran Lake Castle, and this is a good dungeon. It reminds me a lot of going through Anor Londo once the OnlyFans model hard dips are seen. It's also here where you can find what I can only describe as a sex dungeon, and I think Vendrick was overcompensating because he built 2 of them. I also really like the mechanic here with these statues where you need to kill a mob close to them to activate either like a door or an elevator. I've said it before, Dark Souls 2 doesn't get enough praise for how much they thought out of the box with some of their gimmicks and puzzles. They're not all gold, but it is impressive. The final boss of this area has one of the cooler runs to a boss. When fighting the Looking Glass Knight, he will use his shield to summon a reflection to help fight against you. This is where the multi-mob boss fight shines in my opinion because it's part of the lore for the character and also kind of gives me Shadow Link vibes again. I feel like this was supposed to somewhat be similar to the Mimic fight in Elden Ring where you fight a clone of yourself in your build, but the tech probably wasn't there yet, so it was a good attempt. I like this boss fight. Now the bottom of the castle is where we fight the final boss. I mean bosses. But we have 2 DLCs to knock out before then. So the second DLC is the Crown of the Iron King. And this area though looks absolutely fantastic, is so mean to the player. Like, I feel like the devs are bullying me at this point. Bear in mind, I'm pretty leveled up. The enemies' health bars feel like they are far too big and it takes so long to take down some of these enemies. There are these statues everywhere that will either curse you or heal enemy mobs when they're in range. And the only way you can destroy them is with these weird poles that are found in the world, and there are a finite amount of these, and most of them you will need for a boss later on, so you don't want to waste them on the exploration part. And rooms where you need to maneuver mobs in a certain way to make progress through the area without getting completely destroyed. It's just heavy troll material, and the optional boss for this area has the most fuck you back to the boss room run I have ever seen in any of these games. Running back to the second Smelter Demon fight is so obnoxious. It makes me want to pull my hair out. There are so many enemies and archers here trying to stop you from making your way down there, and if you think you could just rush through, you can't, because there are also spellcasters that put a speed debuff on you. Who hurt you as a child, FromSoft? And why didn't they do a better job? Jesus Christ. This made me the most angry in the entire game. But the actual fight, like I said, with the Smelter Demon, wasn't that bad. I learned the pattern very quickly. It's no different to the fight back in the Iron Fortress. But the main boss, the Fume Knight, he is interesting. To begin with, I thought this guy was obnoxiously difficult. Like, he just seemed to heal himself whenever he wasn't fighting in the center of the room. It didn't seem possible to beat him. And after hours of failed attempts, I realized there's these statues around the outside that can be destroyed with this pole that I mentioned before. Thankfully, I didn't use any of these, but God help anyone who wasted them in the actual dungeon itself. I feel like you could get yourself into a dead DLC, right? If you don't use it on these statues. If anyone's actually done it without breaking these statues, let me know. That is insanely impressive. Now that's a cool mechanic, but what's cooler is if you walk into this boss fight wearing Valstad's helm, this will piss off the Fume Knight into going into his second phase straight out of the gate. Now I hear you say, Ty, why would you want to make the boss harder earlier in the fight with full health? Well, funny enough, I found the second phase far easier than the first. I'm not sure if it's just me or if that's a design choice the devs made in case you decided to do this, but I found his move pattern way more predictable in the second phase, so I actually had an easier time with him. Again, it's not really a boss fight where I needed to skill diff him. I had to think outside of the box, and by outside of the box, I mean outside of the arena. Anyway, the last DLC is the Crown of the Ivory King, which is a frozen castle, and this time around, there are far more set pieces that I appreciate.
Turn back. The old chaos hungers still.
It's a shame I just don't like being told what to do. Now in this DLC, I found myself relying quite heavily on backstabs, far more than the base game. And oh my god, this White Phantom, Maldron is the trollest NPC in any FromSoftware game. Patches ain't got nothing on this ghostly douchebag. Just explore this area, you will bump into a random White Phantom, and he pretends to be friendly, a cool lad. He'll go out for a beer with you. You know what? He's just a nice guy. But if you leave him and just head on the area and continue exploring, he will betray you at the most opportune time. And if you attack him first and do even a tiny bit of damage, he runs away like a bitch. Hey Casper, stop running, I'll make it quick. Is that a motherfucking Yeti covetous demon? Even if you manage to get him to fight you man on man, he is so OP. Just like his lance alone seems to home in onto my rectum every other attack. And he is not shy to run away and Estus at any given moment. Honestly, I am very impressed with FromSoftware. They made a bot NPC generally play like a real player. Even the bot invaders in Dark Souls 3 do not hold a candle to this guy. If I didn't know better, I would think this was just some actual person somewhere in the actual world actually fucking with me. The final boss of the DLC is, of course, a multi-mob cage match. Dear Lord, this game loves this mechanic so much. There's also a pretty cool gimmick attached to it though. Throughout the castle while you're exploring, you can find these guys that are locked in cages. If you free them, they will help you in the first phase of this boss fight. And though they don't do too much with the actual fighting, the enemy mobs still seem to be gunning for my hollowed out Bussy more than the guys I brought into the fight. They never drop aggro, but these guys will eventually decide to take themselves out and freeze one of the portals, stopping the enemy mobs from spawning. If they all do this, it will give you a fair fight one-on-one with the Ivory King. I generally feel like you cannot beat this boss without the help of these lads. If you don't have the friendlies, you would have to deal with all of the mobs as well as the main boss, right? Fuck that. The main fight is actually really fun though. I love a tough fight with the gimmicks and the multiple mobs taked out, and it's just a one-on-one, mono-y-mono, big sword versus big sword. It feels more skill-based to me, but with that done in a crap ton of souls, holy. It's time to go back to the base game and do the final boss rush. And the first one is a... Like I mentioned, Dark Souls 2 loves gank fights. Dark Souls 2 loves gank fights, gank fights, gank fights. Oh, for fuck's sake. Every boss in this game makes me feel like I'm being cucked. Why is there so many multi-bosses? You know what? No, I'm done. Not dealing with it. I cheesed this entire section. You see, the NPCs that you have met and helped throughout your journey, they can be summoned for this boss fight. And usually I would say to avoid using summons for bosses because, I mean, the internet will just crucify you. But you know what? I have been getting ganked 90% of the time in this game. It is my turn to have the numbers in my favor. And once you defeat the not Orestein and Smo final boss, we get a surprise final boss against the queen herself, Nalashalandra. Whatever your name is, you're an idiot. Scythes are trash in this game, believe me. She actually does me a solid in this fight, as I had to regain my humanity to summon all of these NPCs for the fight, which means my weapon is now basically doing no damage, as I was no longer hollow. But she has a status debuff where she curses you in the fight, which makes a lot of people really angry, and they tried to avoid getting that debuff in this fight, but your boy Ty ate that shit up. I purposely got cursed in this fight, so I got my buff back on my scythe and made short work of it. I was just running around nomming this curse. Your boy was hungry for some of that hollow. Wow. There you have it. That's 2 back-to-back final boss fights. Those were tough, but thankfully it is all over. Jesus Christ. The game evolved, guys. It went from ganking you with multiple mobs in boss fights to ganking you with multiple boss fights. 3 fights back-to-back, no breaks in between. This is mental. I don't know how you're supposed to do this without summons. The Scholar isn't too bad though. I just kind of coasted and did chip damage while my summons took most of the heat for me, literally. So I'm happy I didn't have to redo this entire rush again. And with that done, we are left with a choice. We can take the throne for ourselves, just like others have done before us, or thanks to the new Scholar of the First Sin edition of the game, we can just get the fuck out. After all them fights, all them deaths, all those people we have helped and failed throughout our journey, you can just decide to say, nah mate, I'm going home. It's so much of an anticlimax, but I fucking love it. The Hollow is just like, dude, this place is whack. I'm going back to Bloodborne or something. Fuck this. And that's Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 2 Scholar of the First Sin. And honestly, I liked it. It has its faults, but I genuinely, non-ironically think it's a better Dark Souls game than Dark Souls 1. It's a sequel in every sense of the word. So you know what? Fight me in the comments section on that. Bring it on. I am used to multi-mob fights now. I can take it. But seriously, jokes aside, Dark Souls 2 is honestly such a good game, and I am so glad I got to revisit the title, as I have most definitely found a new appreciation for it. And an answer to the question, was it that good? Actually, yeah, it really was. I would actually recommend this game to new Dark Souls players, just to give them a sense of how difficult Dark Souls can be, because the next title is easier, that's for damn sure. I am so glad I decided to look back at the Dark Souls franchise for these types of videos, as I have an insanely new appreciation for Dark Souls 2. I will likely always replay Dark Souls 1 more purely due to nostalgia, but I generally do think Dark Souls 2 is a fantastic title and a somewhat better game than the original. And look, I'm not just saying that to be the funny, controversial content creator. I honestly had a complete 180 on this game this time around. And I always find it very fascinating when doing these videos, as more often than not, my thoughts and opinions I originally had when I was younger and played these games for the first time were either wrong, or I just kind of outgrew and changed my tastes in video games. It's super interesting. If you've made it this far in the video, thank you so much, you are a real one, and to let me know you did just that, please, in the comments section, put Dark Souls 2 loves gank fights, because we all know it fucking does. But speaking of legends, I would like to give major props to my patrons for supporting the channel and helping me not go homeless. So thank you, The Shane 209, Ali Tato, and Pit Stab. If you would also like to be a part of this amazing group of people, please click the link and sign up to my Patreon. It really does support me in more ways than you could possibly think of. Now we have one more game to look at, and I cannot wait to see if my opinion on the title has changed at all since launch on Dark Souls 3. But until then guys, that's the end of the video. Stay safe and I'll see you next time. Ty out, peace. Dark Souls 3. Oh boy. After the community collectively banished Dark Souls 2 to the Shadow Realm, and on the back of honestly one of the greatest video games of all time, still waiting for that remaster FromSoft, fans were super excited to learn that Miyazaki himself was coming back home with the milk and a new installment of the Dark Souls franchise. And funny enough, I was right there with the fan base, getting all giddy and excited, counting down the days until the launch of Dark Souls 3. Especially after absolutely hating my first time playing Dark Souls 2 at launch. And after looking back at it recently in one of these videos, I've come to understand that I actually love that title far more than I ever gave it credit for.
I love you, man. I love you too, bud.
I won't dive too much into that right now, but if you're interested, I did do one of these videos on Dark Souls 2, so go check that out after, please. I need the clicks. Anyway, Dark Souls 2 popped a lot of people's cherries for the Soulsborne formula, and is actually the most successful title in the franchise. I had several friends get into these games thanks to this gateway drug. And to be honest, it probably helped that the game came with the original Dark Souls 1 title included on some formats. Not 2 though, because that's not canon, because he didn't make it. So anyway, with our favorite foot-loving game dev in the driver's seat once again, that must mean Dark Souls is back, baby. Kinda. Look, I loved playing through this game back at launch, and if memory serves, looking back, I actually almost 100%ed this. I played through it quite a few times doing a lot of New Game Pluses, but after revisiting it for this video, honestly, the game is lukewarm at best for me. I'm not sure if I've just gotten older or I've started to see things differently since I stopped drinking green Monster energy drinks. But out of all these games that I've played for this series, I've had the most fun revisiting Dark Souls 2, and that should be wrong, right? Dark Souls 3 to me is like Star Wars The Force Awakens. It's a sequel that relies very heavily on the previous game and kind of just wants to ride that nostalgia. I mean, you have an undead castle setting, you have a dark swamp setting, skeletons in a catacomb, underground lava filled with fire demons in a large library. I mean, it's even got Anor Londo and the Firelink Shrine and Squidward. The game is definitely sucking Dark Souls 1's dick. But hey, it's got some awesome bosses and no bed of chaos, so I mean, bonus points there, right? It's weird that the game so heavily references Dark Souls 1, and there's a real lack of Dark Souls 2 love here. There's a couple of mentions here and there, it is technically canon, but to be honest, they're just saying, hey, look at the last game we made, wasn't that so good? And it's even more stupid because, like I said, they gave that game away for free with this game on some formats. It's so stupid. I get that the story is about the world collapsing on itself like a dying star. That's why all these areas and NPCs huddle together in this game, because it's basically the end of the world. But it comes across super desperate, and some things in the game are just pure weak. Stats no longer feel like they break or hinder a player, which ironically I found more fun in Dark Souls 2. The world is not as interconnected as Dark Souls 1, and the lore is quite tame for the series. Though it did pop out some stellar DLC later on. Ring City honestly made me finally get why people are into BDSM. But there were some design choices that were just pure brain dead, like having a pretty big and major questline require you to talk to an NPC on a cliff where the only way you're going to get to them is by provoking a skeleton hate mob.
I think there'd be a lake so deep within these catacombs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Can you hurry up, please? I finished the game and the DLC, and I'm gonna be honest, for a Souls game, it was just okay. And they should not be just okay. Now, before you crucify me in the comment section, this is a comparison to the other two titles in the series. I'm not saying Dark Souls 3 is a D-tier video game. I've used this analogy a few times before, but it's like having a £100 steak. Not like 100 pounds of steak, 100-pound steak from 3 different top quality restaurants. They on their own are absolutely fantastic and blow crappy cheap steaks out of the water. But you're gonna like one more than the other from these top tier restaurants, and that's what it's like. I didn't like this steak as much compared to the other ones I tried. But why is that? Well, to find out, let's dive in and see if Dark Souls 3 was really that good, or is it just a fading flame of a series that needs some real good kindling. So like I said, the world is plunging into darkness. Once again, it is up to you, the Ashen One, yes, that's you, to stop it and help turn the light off or on. It's kind of the same thing as Dark Souls 1. But I'm gonna be honest, okay, I've tried twice now just to let nature take its course, but every single time I pick the ending that I think turns the machine off, it becomes not canon. So you know what? I will light this goddamn fire, but you bet your ass I am gonna get myself a goth mummy bride, and I will be the king of this bitch. Mark my words. This will shock you, but this time I'm going for a dexed build, but will be heavily pumping points into luck for something a little later on new to this game. Right off the bat, you will notice that Dark Souls 3 does implement a lot of new mechanics into the game. One specifically is weapon arts. Yes, just like Elden Ring, it started here, folks. Honestly, it's a great improvement having weapons rocking their own special move. It's great for builds, but it is kind of a double-edged sword in Dark Souls 3 because, I mean, where are all the weapons? There feels far less of them in Dark Souls 3 compared to any of the other titles. This was probably due to the time it took to cook these weapon arts, but at that point, why bother? And most of the weapons you come across, you won't use because there's always a better version just around the corner. In my example, I rushed straight away to get the Great Scythe, because if I'm one thing, it's consistent outside of YouTube. And I used this for all of 2 minutes because right after I got it, a better scythe was available, the Corvian Scythe. It does everything the Great Scythe can do, but better, and it has good bleed. As a caveat, it does put bleed on the user. Barely. You won't notice this. Wait, hold on. Life Hunt Scythe, is that you?
Look how they massacred my boy.
So like I said, most weapons you find will be just placement holders till the real boys start dropping. But don't worry, while you explore for these hidden gems, the game will be constantly kicking you in the dick. Now this might be a personal problem, completely me orientated, but the overworld really fucking hates the player. Usually in Souls games, the exploration is pretty tame till you hit the boss, and that's where the difficulty skyrockets. But in Dark Souls 3, I found myself having far more of a problem in these exploration segments than, to be honest, any boss in the entire game. Do you want to know what killed me the most in my entire playthrough? I'll give you some hints. It was not the twins boss fight. It wasn't Eldridge. It wasn't the final boss in the base game, and it wasn't the final fight in the last piece of DLC against Slave Knight Gale. It was this goddamn mob not 20 minutes into the playthrough. This red-eyed son of a bitch fucked me in the ass so much he could probably draw the interior from memory. This guy sucks. I felt like I just was not getting it with him. And this ends up being a theme throughout the game. Random mobs having massive health bars and taking out way too much health on their hits. You should not need to Estus Flask after every single poke. Hell, these hollows holding just a big stick gave me more trouble than the Nameless King. And I am not over exaggerating. I don't know, maybe I just need to get good, but to be honest, most of the bosses, I had flawless runs, except the Sage. Fuck the Sage, man. I thought I was playing Dark Souls, not Binding of Isaac. What was I talking about again? Oh yeah. Anyway, you start your run at Firelink Shrine. Yeah, because you remember Dark Souls 1 was a thing. And you are tasked with killing 4 of the Lords of Cinders to grant you access to the final boss. We have Yorm the Giant, the Abyss Watchers, Eldritch the Saint of the Deep, and Lothric and his roided out brother. To do this, we have to explore the land, and though it is a bit predictable with the set pieces, it doesn't really stretch too far away from the traditional formula. The areas do look good, I have to give credit, especially Illithil. My god, this was a treat to explore. Actually, I take that back. Just like with Dark Souls 2, you will need to do far more crowd control, and honestly, if you don't set out with something like a bow or ranged magic, you're gonna have a bad time. But unlike Dark Souls 2, where it was just copy and paste most of the time, it's more tactical how these mobs have been placed. It feels more like a chess match than just running through gunning down mobs through an exploration section. And along the way, we will meet a decent amount of NPCs. Our favorite Winnie the Pooh in a suit of armor is back, and his questline has us team up against mobs, breaking them out of jail, breaking them out of a well. Dude, this guy gets captured all the time. Unfortunately, in my playthrough, just like Dark Souls 1, it ends abruptly. One of the most obscure questlines is for the Hollow ending, where you do a bunch of, honestly, BS that can be very easily missed in true FromSoft fashion, but it does lead to the main character actually canonically getting hitched to Best Girl Anri in some weird necrophilia stuff. I don't know. She has to die for this to play out. Was it good for you? This ending plays quite well with my build as well, to be honest. I infused my scythe to be a hollow weapon, which is new to Dark Souls 3, which means it doesn't just scale with dex, it will also scale with my luck stat, and the more hollow I become, the more damage I output with it. It's pretty good. And going hollow in this game doesn't actually have really any negative effects. You get the buff that I just mentioned for some weapons, you get 5 free level ups from this guy, and you get the babe. It's a win-win-win. Just don't look in the mirror.
You're ugly, you're disgusting, I'm gonna kill you, give me $200.
Patches also makes his classic return in all of his trollishy assholeness. by tricking us thinking he is the Onion Knight himself. But in actuality, he stole his armor. What a dick.
Say hello to the nice giant. He adores visitors. Where's the old giant? What? Where's the bloody giant? Just what have you done? How dare you? Have you no shame? Damn, 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 and damn, damn, damn.
Yeah, I'm coming for you, bitch. So our first Lord of Cinder is the Abyss Watchers, and I really like this fight. It's basically a fan meetup of all these Artorias enjoyers, and we just kind of interrupt their RP session and take them all on. But because these guys are just endlessly fighting each other, some will actually aggro the main Watcher. So you actually kind of get teammates, just don't hit them because you'll take the aggro from the boss. And you know this is the boss Watcher because he has the bigger health bar. Their movement is super agile and really does give us some Notorious vibes, and honestly the whole game overall is much faster paced than Dark Souls 1 and 2. You can really tell that they've taken the mechanics from Bloodborne and tried to implement them into a Dark Souls game. And in some cases it can be a bit BS, like with the Frost Knights. What is happening? Jesus Christ. But it does make the boss fights feel more like a dance rather than a turn-based RPG where you just wait for your time to hit. I also love that for the first time, these guys are rocking a Dex Greatsword that has a parry knife. Like, it's an excellent boss weapon if you want to run it. It has a cool weapon art as well. Second phase has a beefed up Watcher with the same moveset, but now he has this weird flame after image after his attacks. And honestly, it's pretty hard to dodge. I felt like I just had to tank a lot of these hits with this guy because, I mean, you can dodge the initial strike, but the flame will probably hit you straight after. You can't dodge both in most instances. But after defeating the Watchers, we venture into a spooky skeleton home and then hell. Well, at least there's not dragon butts this time. Remember when I said some overworld mobs seemed harder than bosses?
Father, the sleeper has awakened!
Next, we venture through Demon Souls and honestly get one of the best jump scares I've witnessed in gaming for a while. I just made poopy. Wait, that wasn't the jump scare. No, I actually meant this guy. Jesus fucking Christ. The jailers in this area are pretty annoying as well. They will shrink down your maximum health when they just look at you, so you can very easily get one-tapped if you're not careful in this area. Venturing further down, we will find Yorm the Giant, our second Lord of Cinder fight, and this is a gimmick fight. Though having Squidward walking right after you for a 2v1, if you follow his quest line, that's pretty hype stuff, but he will most likely die, and he died in my playthrough, so I'm really glad I spent hours doing his quest line for him to walk in this room and get knocked out. The actual fight is a breeze. It's like the alpha version of the God-devouring serpent from Elden Ring. You just have to use the weapon that's already in the arena to beat him. He is super weak to it and it will stagger him every time you use the weapon art. Super easy boss if you cheese him. Next is Aldridge, and she is taking up housing in, you guessed it, Anor Londo, and though it is far smaller than the original, I would be lying if I didn't say it's great to see this place again. Actually redact that. It's here where I really got a feel of being invaded and the duality of some of the invaders you can find. One guy invaded me and led me to an area far away from mobs to do a standard 1v1, which honestly, mad respect to the guy. He did destroy me, like obliterated me, but he was a good sportsman about it. Then another guy invaded me and, well, cool. But I don't know, maybe it's contagious because I also got a bit of revenge on an invasion myself. As soon as I got invaded, I decided to just lay down with an emote that you can find, honestly the best one, and see if this guy could find me, and he really couldn't. No way. No way.
Huh?
Eventually, he did find my Ashanasi, so I sent him back home. That honestly was so much fun. I want to chase that feeling. I now get why so many YouTubers do those prank invasions. It's great fun. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, Aldridge gives people so many issues, but I have always gone for a melee build, so she isn't much of an issue for me. Her moves are quite easy to avoid when you're up close and personal. Just make sure when she teleports to the other side of the arena, you book it to her straight away, or she'll just become a Quincy and see how many arrows she can fit in your butthole. It's honestly the only move I found to be a problem. Rest of the fight pretty easy. I quickly realized this was the same arena where we fought Orestein and Smo all those years ago in Dark Souls 1, so I got quite excited for what could be just upstairs.
My disappointment is immeasurable, and my day is ruined.
The last of the 4 souls we need is in the back end of Lothric Castle, and this section honestly is bloody awesome. We have dragons, we have an absolutely awesome entry boss with the dancer, we have these super cool backdrops, like I don't know what these are, but they look cool, and the eclipse, oh, it's beautiful. One of my favorite areas of the game. We even have to go through an archives to get to the boss, and we deal with these weird wax mobs. Again, I love the creativity of these enemies, and the game throughout doesn't really copy and paste enemies. There's a lot of variety in them. But I'm gonna be honest, the spooky ghost hands coming out of the walls, this looks out of place in Dark Souls 3. Anyone else? This is some straight up Scooby-Doo shit right here. The boss fight is with Lothric and his brother, and like many of the other bosses, it's pretty easy to deal with, but in the second phase, they just decide to just throw magic bullshit to dodge. I hate this almost as much as gang fights in Dark Souls 2. But if you can avoid the magic, the melee attacks are pretty easy to avoid, and just make sure you kill little bro first, because he will heal the big guy and prolong the boss fight if you don't. Alright, so with Lothric dead, we can now technically head to the final boss, but first, let's head to the gardens of Lothric Castle and dunk on this dragon that has some serious maternal issues. We get a gesture here to take us to Archdragon Peak. Doing the emote at this statue here, we get another gimmick boss where we have to do like a Gmod death run through the area while we're being gunned down by this dragon till we get to a cliff and we can one-tap him. Super easy to do, but honestly quite exhilarating. I generally clinched my butthole in this section, and every time an enemy just strolled out as I was booking it to the cliff, it made me skip a few heartbeats. It was very adrenaline inducing. The main course of this area is the Nameless King, and he is a different story entirely. To access him, we must ring a bell, and just like with Dark Souls 1, you can hear when other players are actually ringing the bell themselves as you're exploring Dragon Arch Peak. It's really cool. It's the opposite, where back in Dark Souls 1, it was the sound of a hollow completing the first real challenge of the game. It was a victory ring. Here it signifies someone has just locked in and is now fighting one of the hardest bosses in the game. And my god, the boss itself is just pure cinema. The foreboding weather, the fact that we're fighting on top of an actual cloud. I mean, even his entrance is hype as fuck. He's riding a dragon, bro. We had like 8 dragon riders in Dark Souls 2 and they were not riding dragons. What the fuck was that? Unfortunately, the first phase of this fight, it sucks, man. You think the biggest problem you'll have will be either the Jesus looking guy or the giant chicken he's riding, but it's actually the lock-on system. The boss is near impossible to fight when you use the lock-on. It constantly screws you up. Most of the time I had no idea what was going on and what was going to hit me or what move the Nameless King was about to use. It's so aggravating. It's honestly a bit unfair. I probably would have had an easier time just closing my eyes and just winging the fight. But once we take out the dragon, the Nameless King will make sure we did a good job. What the fuck? And then the true fight starts, and it is a spectacle of a fight. It's honestly a lot easier than when he was on the dragon, but it's so great to do. Once you learn the move pattern, it feels so good dodging his attacks. And none of them really feel too cheap. Definitely up there as one of my top 10 bosses in these games. So goddamn good. So we have a pocket full of Cinder Lord souls. We're married to our dead waifu and look like rotten meat. I think it's time to put an end to this nonsense and take out the final boss. But first we have 2 very solid DLCs to take out. Ashes of Arendelle and The Ringed City. Arendelle starts off in a snowy plains where we get ganked by a bunch of wolves and... Sif, is that you? Oh shit guys, he's gone rabid. We quickly meet Sister Fried and she basically says, it's cool that we're here, but could we kindly fuck right off and finish the base game? We don't belong in this painted world. Okay, that was pretty rude, so I'm gonna do the exact opposite and explore this area and all its fugliness. Also, I bet everyone hit this NPC for the first time they were playing right. He must get hit by everyone, or am I just an asshole? There's an optional fight here where we fight Sif's big brother. It's not too bad, and after exploring what I assume is Asmongold's downstairs living room, we find and open the door to the final boss fight. And I love how this entire area is built in like a circle. You explore what seems like quite far, and then just as you open the door back at the start for the boss fight, it loops in on itself. Great game design. Miyazaki, you are a true blessing. And speaking of Miyazaki...
Fret not, Father. We have no need of thy flail. 'Tis only the flame quivering at misguided ash.
There it is, boys. Let's go. Walking around barefooted on those dirty floors? She must have dark souls. Jesus. I loved and then quickly grew to hate this boss fight. Sister Fried walks in and pulls out a scythe of her own. So me personally, I felt like it was a more interesting boss fight. We weren't fighting just for the sake of it. We were fighting to see who was the best at harvesting wheat. She rocks a frost scythe, so I threw on a flame to make the fight seem more epic. Once defeated, the big guy in the back of the room, which I think was her dad, mercy reses her, and now we have to deal with both of them. You can use Slave Knight Gale's summon sign here, which I did. It will make the fight a lot easier. It's a tough boss, but not too bad. Why is the boss music still playing? There's a third phase? I'm gonna be honest, I was quite hyped when this first happened because it broke that traditional 2-phase formula. It was a surprise that you come to expect from these games, but my god, it is a test of your endurance. She still has somewhat the same moveset, but now she just cakes everything in this black flame. Oh great, another boss that has attacks that have 2 hit procs, so near to each other that it's almost impossible to dodge both. Fun. In my opinion, she is probably the hardest boss in the game, not including this guy. Fuck this guy. But she's still basically Melania if she was mid, so not too bad. Once she's defeated, we get 2 bonfires for the price of 1. One just being a standard boss fire for the boss arena, and the other one leading to the second DLC, the Ringed City. And this place is pretty fucking cool, guys. I know I've said that a lot, but towards the end of the game, it did feel like they started putting a bit more creativity into the areas, which I really like. It starts in a dilapidated world, and there are literal angels here. Motherfucking angels trying to deliver us a swift death. It's pretty insane. It's a difficult area. And the gameplay's a little bit different too. You don't really go out and fight mobs. You're kind of just hiding the entire time, jumping from safe area to safe area. It's really interesting. So you can probably tell I like this area a lot, and it's not just because the devs have based enemy placement. Running through the area, you have to put a lot of faith into these messages on the ground telling you it's safe to drop down from quite a height. I'm not sure this is how Ash actually works and if it's soft when it's a pile, but hate doesn't work how it works in Assassin's Creed, so I'm not going to judge it. It's game logic. One drop will lead us to a fight against the demon princes. This will look like a ridiculous fight you've just been rushed into, but it just ends up being a bait and hit fight. The tactic I used is when both of these guys were pissed off, I just outrun everything. I didn't try to get any damage, I just got away. One will tucker out eventually, and then you can do some damage on the one that still has zoomies that's trying to fight you, as he's easier to dodge on his own. I tried going for the slower one a bit, but honestly, when he's tuckered out, you're better off leaving him and dealing with the faster one, because as you fight the slower one, the faster one will just start hitting you off screen. It's not worth it. But the meat of the dish is the Ringed City, and after beating the princes, our favorite Nulondo taxi service picks us up and, oh no, it's the bridge. Why, man? This bit sucks. The lanky asshole on the other side will just constantly summon archers that, let's be honest, if you get tagged by them, you might as well pull the controller down because you're going back to the last bonfire. Unless you're like me. We also get probably the sickest looking mobs from FromSoftware to date in this DLC. The Ringed City Knights literally look like a metal band poster, and I love it. I loved it so much, I decided to RP them once I got all their armor sets to drop. Obviously not changing the Fallen Knight helm. This is a staple, and this thing is beautiful. Do not kink shame me. The area is tough and bonfires are pretty lacking in this DLC, but to be honest, it makes sense. This is the last area of Darksouls as a whole. But lore-wise, it kind of makes sense too. This is the end of the world. Ain't nobody camping out here. We bitch slap a dragon.
So long, Bowser!
And we get a boss that's pretty familiar to us. This is a reference back to the old monk boss in Demon Souls, as a player will spawn in as the boss if you're online. It's a pretty nice callback, but I'm sure it probably does make some stupid experience. The guy I got generally fought me like a normal lad, loved it, but if a player doesn't fight back, I could see this being very awkward. Once that is done, we meet Philinor, one of Gwyn's daughters, and we touch her egg because why not? That wasn't me. Women, am I right? Welcome to the last boss of the DLC, against the Slave Knight Gale. Yep, that guy that was helping us pretty much throughout all the DLCs. He is the fight, and he starts off pretty primal, jumping around like one of those Abyss Watchers, but the boss fight does eventually get more and more difficult as you play through, and it is absolutely jaw-dropping. This fight, again, pure cinema and epic in every way. The music isn't having a smoke out back either. It is locked in and going hard. Just listen. It's such a good fight, and I'll even give a pass on the stupid after image attacks that he does because it's literally just his cape that's wet hand slapping me in the face each time. Some of his attacks even cause lightning to crash down on the ground. It's so good. I don't know, something about learning this boss's pattern and executing dodges perfectly and finding those moments to attack. It feels like I'm finally seeing the Matrix or something. It clicks so hard. This right here, this moment is why I love Dark Souls and these types of games. The grandeur of the fight, the lore being downright depressing, and nothing that really feels too cheap or gimmicky. It's just kind of a pure one-on-one sword play fight in a big arena. It's fantastic. I loved it so much. To me, it's just like the Artorias fight I loved so much back in Dark Souls 1. Or the Sir Alon fight in Dark Souls 2 is honestly so good. It's a pretty difficult boss fight, but it's not ridiculously difficult. It's a good fight to have under your belt. Fuck, man. That was so good. I need a cigarette or something. Jesus. Okay, so the DLC is defeated. It's time to light up these boys' souls and go forth and beat the Lord of Cinder. Boss fight's okay. At least it's not Gwyn again. As I'm going for the Hollow Lord ending, I bring in my Londo groupies, and to be honest, we just destroy him. The fight is kind of cool. The Lord of Cinder does have a few different phases where he switches weapons and builds throughout the fight, but man, this combo attack here can just do one. Cheap moves like this don't give it an S-star status like Gale. But with the Cinder Lord out of the picture, it is time to light the flame once more, but this time, instead of being the Kindle, I'm going to just run this bitch as king. For me, you know what? Hollow's got a bad rap. People kind of treat us like a plague. It's time to rise up. I'm starting a revolution. And after getting an extremely cool shot of us walking into the camera, the credits fade in. And I cannot wait for Dark Souls 4 to make this ending not canon, just like my other playthroughs. Oh man, Dark Souls 3 was a great time, but I'm gonna be honest, it is the weakest in the series for me. It played it far too safe and relied far too heavily on its nostalgia to keep the player invested. Yes, I liked seeing the old faces, and yes, I loved revisiting old locations like Anor Londo. These places I have come to love in the series, but I'm not an idiot, Miyazaki. I know what you're doing. It feels a bit desperate, and not including content from Dark Souls 2 feels awfully mean for no reason. Yes, there's a few things nodding back to that game, so yes, the game does in fact exist in the canon, but why bother if that's all you're going to give it? Dark Souls 3 is a celebration of Dark Souls 1, and I haven't seen much research and evidence of this, but it feels like it wasn't even something Miyazaki wanted to make necessarily. To me, he feels like a one and done dev. He makes his masterpiece and then wants to move on to the next one. That's how this guy thrives, and he does some goddamn good content doing it. But I have a sneaking suspicion that this was a FromSoft and shareholders decision, and them wanting a big payday. And I mean, going by the sale numbers, they got it. And it isn't bad. Miyazaki did put in work, but it does feel just a bit weak. The stake just wasn't that good for me compared to the others. And I don't know if I'm in the majority or the minority in that. Please let me know. This has been a hell of a project, guys. I have really enjoyed revisiting these games back to back. I can't believe my opinion changed so much on Dark Souls 2, and the fact that now in my rankings, the games look like this. That's wild. Dark Souls 2 took the crown? I definitely didn't see that coming. These games not only started a whole sub-genre, but really goes to show you that when a dev is so passionate about a project, it can honestly make waves in the industry. It isn't just that Miyazaki has this godlike golden touch. It's just that he cares about his art, and it's sad to say there isn't much left of that in AAA titles nowadays. But it's not all doom and gloom. We are starting to see more and more devs finally start to give a shit about what they pump onto discs. So hopefully we'll start seeing more stellar titles hitting shelves in the coming years. And that goddamn Bloodborne remaster, Jesus Christ. Honestly, I would take a PC port at this point. I would like to take a moment to shout out these Ashen Lords for supporting me and my content on Patreon. Honestly, you guys help me out so much. I have nothing but undying respect to you. Thank you, Pitstab, Ali Tato, The Shane 209, and Chris Spicer. You guys are the humanity that stops this channel going hollow. We still have a couple of titles to look at from this beautiful, beautiful man, but I have another project that I can't put off much longer, so if you thought the pain I had to go through playing through these games and their difficulty was bad, you haven't seen true torture yet. See you next time, guys. As always, stay safe out there. Tie out. Peace.